Hi there, it's Sandy Allnock here for Ellen Hudson, and I bring you another in the Watercolor Techniques series. Today we're going to talk about wet in wet. Wet in wet is when one color that is wet is dropped into another color that's wet. It could be just water, but I think the look of dropping one paint into another wet paint is so beautiful, and it's really where watercolor comes into its own. I'm going to start by painting a purplish color that I've mixed onto each one of these petals. Now this is a poinsettia, but you can make poinsettias any color you want, right? So I just mixed up a fun purple color, a reddish purple. And then I'm going to drop a red color at the base of it to add to the dimension of the flower. You can see those first three petals that I've already painted have kind of a reddish glow on the inside of them. And I'm going to show you how I created that. So I'm just going to take the red color and drop it, just making little almost polka dots right there at the center of the flower and letting that color kind of bloom out. Now, one of the tips for something like this is to make sure that your colors are about the same or approximately the same ratio of water to pigment. If I were to drop a really watery red into this deep purple, then I would end up getting potentially some blooms of water instead of getting that lovely mixing of the paints. Now here's a bonus tip. I mixed a little bit too much of the heavy purple portion into that one petal, so I'm moving some of it over to another. So you can use a place where you've oversaturated with color and pick that up and move it to another area of your painting. As I'm moving along, I'm doing a little bit of adjusting of the petal colors as I go, because what I'm noticing is how those first petals are drying much lighter, and I wanted to make sure that I dried all the petals with the same kind of intensity of color. So you'll notice that I'm laying my brush down to pick up color from areas that got a little too saturated and spreading it out over some of the other petals. And then sometimes I'll be adding more of the paint from the palette to try to adjust that color. Something like this certainly doesn't have to be perfect, but I wanted to paint a little petal at a time rather than try to paint all the petals and then have them dry before I'm doing this dropping in of color. Once my flower was completed and dried, I ended up painting the leaves next. I wanted to make sure I waited till they were dry so that I didn't get any purple mixing in with my green leaves, but I've painted a light green for the base, and then I'm just going to drop in a mix of some dark green right along where the center of the leaf is, and then down along the bottom. Super easy to do this and make it look like you've done all sorts of fancy shading, as long as you know which side of something to put shading on, and that's really usually the bottom or anywhere where there's a crease in a stamped image or a drawn image. And adding just two colors can make a world of difference in your watercolor. And when you're adding them wet in wet, the color just moves within the other color pretty easily, and you don't have to manipulate. You can poke around at it a little bit like I'm doing, but a lot of times you can just let it go. And that's what I'm going to show you here in the background. So we need to do our rectangle of color, right? Since we're doing swatchy things. So I'm going to paint a rectangle of this orangish color that I've mixed up. And I'm going to use all that leftover purple that I have left in my palette. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do to make this wet in wet and do it as a background. And it came out as this very cool marbleized look that I think is just a whole lot of fun, and it adds a lot of contrast in texture to the flower because it's just got all these little drops of color that I've added, and it's wet in wet color, although make sure the flower around it is good and dry first because you wouldn't want to bleed that color out. But look at how gorgeous that came out. And it's here on the graphic, this infographic that you can pin to your watercolor learnings board, whatever it is that you have collected on Pinterest, so that you can have all these ideas in one place. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you again next week with another watercolor tip. Bye-bye. Have a great week.